Alright, folks, just bear with me just for a few seconds, just getting some things out the way, and then we will begin the podcast. Sorry, guys, a little bit late. Had a little bit of an issue with the puppy who decided today was a good day to have an accident, so had to get him clean, get myself cleaned up, and had to clean up a crime scene because it was a crime scene. Alright, so let's get to it. Alright, so now you see my beautiful face here. Let's get on down to it. Today's date, June 1st, 2019, and this is how the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan on how the Frack We Got Here. We do take last week's events and honestly try to make sense of it all. Before I do get started, this is an adult podcast, which means that things of adult language and things of a graphic nature may be shown, so viewer discretion is advised. So, for all those who are still here, welcome. Okay, so to go ahead and get right on into it, let's just be honest. We cannot actually start this podcast without immediately starting with one of the top stories. Unfortunately, this happened as of yesterday about the shooting at Virginia Beach.
Condolences and prayers go to the families of those who left home this morning and will not return tonight.
Tragedy in Virginia Beach Friday evening. A mass shooting at the Virginia Municipal Building, the deadliest mass shooting in America since November of 2018, when 12 people were killed at the Borderline Country Music Bar in California.
Today is Virginia Beach's darkest hour.
I have a number of officers right now who are processing through what best could be described as a war zone.
A Virginia government source tells CNN it was a disgruntled employee, 40-year-old Dwayne Craddock, who worked as a certified professional engineer for the city of Virginia Beach. They say he walked into the municipal building with a .45 caliber handgun and opened fire, leaving behind a trail of carnage.
The suspect was reloading extended magazines in that handgun, firing at victims throughout the building and at our officers.
Police say they want people to remember the victims and not their killer.
We will release his name once. We're going to mention his name once, and then he will be forever referred to as the suspect.
Craddock was killed during a long gun battle with police.
We have numerous victims, and we have numerous families. Let's make sure that we keep their dignity and their respect as the number one piece of news that we're going to give out.
Now, I do get it. I mean, it's a tragedy in Virginia Beach that somebody decided that, today was going to be the day to end lives. And let's be honest, this is starting to become, or it already has become, let's just call it what it is. I hate to say that we're becoming desensitized to it, because that's what it seems like. I remember when the first time we had mass shootings, it was, oh God, how could this happen? How can we prevent it? To nowadays, and this could just be me, but I've just noticed whenever there's a mass shooting out, we just simply we don't have the same shock as we used to. We don't have the immediate awareness that something is wrong that we used to. It's more along the lines of, oh God, not this again. Now, before all the gun nuts and homosexuals come out the woodwork, the problem I have with this story is that how the police are handling the shooter. You're protecting the shooter. I mean, let's just call it what it is. You don't have a picture, you said his name once, and then you decided as the police department, we are going to refer to him as the suspect. Where, I'm sorry, Freedom of Information Act means that we can actually request that information, because even though it's in an ongoing police investigation, you can release the names as many times as you want. You can show the picture as long as he's over 18 as many times as you want. Now, I get they're trying to control the narrative, but you don't control the narrative in a mass murder like this. The facts should be laid out as you gather them. The people involved should be laid out as you receive that information. It is not up to the police to decide that, oh, we're not going to give this suspect any more time. No, that's the thing I don't do. Now, as bad, as horrible as that situation is, it is not up to the police to decide we're only going to mention his name once and then we're going to refer to him as the suspect. That makes no sense. That's like saying, you know what, if a mass murderer killed 45 people, let's just use my home state. If a mass murder happened in Tennessee and it killed 45 or more people, are the police going to sit there and say, we're only going to mention the suspect's name once, and then after that, we refer to him as the suspect? What sense does that make? Because again, that the police try to stand and say, we're not going to give this man time. He's not going to be here to represent himself. He's not going to be here to take advantage of this so-called publicity that you think you're getting from him. So again, why in the world would, as I said, I don't get the officer's standpoint on this. It makes no sense to me to actually do that. So, I mean, it is tragic, and I definitely feel, because mass murders are becoming too common, and we're becoming so far normalized with it that I'm afraid it's going to fall right on the wayside as far as what to do about mass shootings in schools. Because when it comes down to it, the subject is about guns, and truth be told, there's a lot that can be done about it, but will it be done? Not as long as there's lobbying in Congress. But I just want to share that, because it's sad that a mass murder has happened. It's even worse how the police are actually handling the suspect's information. That bothers me very greatly. But moving right along, Robert Mueller did speak about the Russia investigation. He was actually the special investigator for the last 2 years, investigating whether or not that the Trump administration had collusion with Russia. That was the original idea of the scope. Now, of course, the scope did end with him giving his report to Barr. Barr redacted it and called it the Mueller report, which really was the Barr report, and made it public to everybody. And of course, it's 400 plus pages. I've read it. And honestly, it's got like 11 to 12 different instances of obstruction of justice that Congress can follow. However, Mueller did not go ahead and make the distinction on whether or not Trump had obstructed justice. A lot of people wanted to do that. William Barr decided, because he was Trump's personal attorney and attorney general, that he decided he was going to do so. So, with that being said, he did give a public statement about this, and I'm going to let the entirety of it run, because honestly, after that, after the video runs, and I'm going to be able to go from there as far as what to take from that. So here goes, guys.
The Attorney General
asked me to serve as special counsel, and he created the special counsel's office. The appointment order directed the office to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. This included investigating any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Now, I have not spoken publicly during our investigation. I'm speaking out today because our investigation is complete. The Attorney General has made the report on our investigation largely public. We are formally closing the special counsel's office, and as well, I'm resigning from the Department of Justice to return to private life. I'll make a few remarks about the results of our work. But beyond these few remarks, it is important that the office's written work speak for itself. Let me begin where the appointment order begins, and that is interference in the 2016 presidential election. As alleged by the grand jury in an indictment, Russian intelligence officers who were part of the Russian military launched a concerted attack on our political system. The indictment alleges that they used sophisticated cyber techniques to hack into computers and networks used by the Clinton campaign. They stole private information and then released that information through fake online and identities and through the organization WikiLeaks. The releases were designed and timed to interfere with our election and to damage a presidential candidate. And at the same time, as the grand jury alleged in a separate indictment, a private Russian entity engaged in a social media operation where Russian citizens posed as Americans in order to influence an election. These indictments contain allegations, and we are not commenting on the guilt or the innocence of any specific defendant. Every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. The indictments allege, and the other activities in our report describe, efforts to interfere in our political system. They needed to be investigated and understood, and that is among the reasons why the Department of Justice established our office. That is also a reason we investigated efforts to obstruct the investigation. The matters we investigated were of paramount importance. It was critical for us to obtain full and accurate information from every person we questioned. When a subject of an investigation obstructs that investigation or lies to investigators, it strikes at the core of the government's effort to find the truth and hold wrongdoers accountable. Let me say a word about the report. The report has two parts, addressing the two main issues we were asked to investigate. The first volume of the report details numerous efforts emanating from Russia to influence the election. This volume includes a discussion of the Trump campaign's response to this activity, as well as our conclusion that there was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy. And in the second volume, the report describes the results and analysis of our obstruction of justice investigation involving the president. The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. And we conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting attorney general apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report, after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited. The special counsel's office is part of the Department of Justice, and by regulation, it was bound by that department policy. Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider. The department's written opinion explaining the policy makes several important points that further informed our handling of the obstruction investigation. Those points are summarized in our report, and I will describe two of them for you. First, the opinion explicitly permits the investigation of a sitting president because it is important to preserve evidence while memories are fresh and documents available. Among other things, that evidence could be used if there were co-conspirators who could be charged now. And second, the opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. And beyond department policy, we were guided by principles of fairness. It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge. So that was Justice Department policy. Those were the principles under which we operated, and from them we concluded that we would not reach a determination one way or the other about whether the president committed a crime. That is the office's final position, and we will not comment on any other conclusions or hypotheticals about the president. We conducted an independent criminal investigation and reported the results to the Attorney General, as required by department regulations. The Attorney General then concluded that it was appropriate to provide our report to Congress and to the American people. At one point in time, I requested that certain portions of the report be released. The Attorney General preferred to make the entire report public all at once, and we appreciate that the Attorney General made the report largely public, and I certainly do not question the Attorney General's good faith in that decision. Now, I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this manner. I am making that decision myself. No one has told me whether I can or should testify or speak further about this matter. There has been discussion about an appearance before Congress. Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. It contains our findings and analysis and the reasons for the decisions we made. We chose those words carefully, and the work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony. I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress. In addition, access to our underlying work product is being decided in a process that does not involve our office. So beyond what I've said here today and what is contained in our written work, I do not believe it is appropriate for me to speak further about the investigation or to comment on the actions of the Justice Department or Congress. And it's for that reason I will not be taking questions today as well. Now, before I step away, I want to thank the attorneys, the FBI agents, the analysts, the professional staff who helped us conduct this investigation in a fair and independent manner. These individuals, who spent nearly 2 years with the special counsel's office, were of the highest integrity. And I will close by reiterating the central allegation of our indictments, that there were multiple, systematic efforts to interfere in our election. And that allegation deserves the attention of every American. Thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, so I know 9 minutes, but I wanted to play the entirety of it. The reason why is because we need to hear what Mueller had to say. Keep in mind, Democrats have been trying to get Mueller to testify in Congress. Mueller has sat there and said that he would only testify in private, which I don't really like, but for a guy who's been on the radar for 2 years, I kind of understand it. I'd rather it be public because I think Mueller is like everybody else. Now, what do we take from that 9 minutes he just said? Okay, as a guy who's read the Barr report and as a guy who's watched this several times, go ahead and tell you. Number one, there is a lot of smoke. They did not conclude that Russia interfered in our election wholeheartedly. They did say that there were massive amounts of suspicion that Russia did try to interfere in the election. They couldn't confirm that 100%, but again, major allegations. Number two, the one thing that a lot of people need to take away from, Mueller sat there and said it best. If we could have exonerated the president, we would have. But we did not have enough to implicate him. What does that pretty much say? That pretty much says that they got hamstrung somewhere along the way. Which a lot of people, if you don't remember, Mueller wanted to investigate Trump. Trump and his lawyers decided that was not a good idea, mainly because the man couldn't keep his lies straight. So, of course, the lawyer sat there and said, well, we'll submit Mueller's questions, answers to Mueller's questions in writing. In which we all know, Trump don't write. His lawyers do. Everybody else does. That man doesn't write shit but a signature on bullshit. So, again, the Mueller investigation was hamstringed a lot. I mean, if you really think about it. I mean, Attorney Generals for number one. William Barr was ramrodded into Attorney General after Jeff Sessions left, mainly put because Trump wanted a yes man as the Attorney General. Because, let's be honest, everybody thinks that the president is the most powerful seat in Congress, and it is. The second most, in my opinion, is not the Vice President. It's the Attorney General. The Attorney General can bring the executive branch under indictment. Keep in mind about that. That's the reason why Trump wanted a pro-Trump person as Attorney General. Why? Because, let's be honest, if it was anybody else, they would have probably pushed for impeachment of the president. Probably. I mean, as long as they're not a Trump fan. The other part I take away from this is that he sat there and said the decision to indict Trump was not up to him and his counsel. And he's correct. And that's the one thing that was being reiterated the entire time. Mueller was only supposed to investigate and present his findings to the Attorney General, and his recommendation would go to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General will be the one to either push forward to it. Now, if anybody with half a brain was reading the Barr report, you would notice there's 11 to 12 different areas of obstruction of justice. Not to mention the 9 outside of not to mention the 9 to 10 instances outside of the investigation. You know, where he fired James Comey, where he pretty much fired pretty much of his administration. He fired the the chair of the Fed, which he put Mnuchin in. He put IRS. He fired the IRS and put Mnuchin there. I mean, there's different instances of where he obstructed justice that wasn't just in this alleged collusion with Russia. So again, it makes no sense up to this point that how in the world did we not see this, that Mueller's going to come forward and say, well, I'm laying this all out for you, because he's pretty much saying in so many words, Congress, do your fucking job. Because he pretty much sat there and said, we presented this roadmap, and it is a roadmap to basically say, yes, Trump is dirty, as if we need an investigation to tell us, but now we have written proof about it. But aside from all that, the one thing I do take away from that is that I wish Mueller would publicly testify, because I think that he'll have a difference of opinion when it comes to that, as far as how he looks at stuff and how his investigation goes, because Barr tells a very different story. And if you want to know how different it is, pretty much this is William Barr, as I like to call him, his Trump's personal presidential attorney, acting as Attorney General. This is what he said.
So Robert Mueller contradicted him on camera about major details in the Mueller report. We are now hearing from Attorney General Bill Barr. He just talked to CBS News, saying that he does not agree with Mueller's assertion that he was not capable of determining if the president committed criminal activity because of that DOJ policy that directs a sitting president that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Here he was.
We saw the special counsel yesterday make that statement. He analyzed 11 instances where there were possible obstruction, and then said that he really couldn't make a decision. Do you agree with that interpretation?
I personally felt he could have reached a decision.
In your view, he could have reached a conclusion.
Right, he could have reached a conclusion. The opinion says you cannot indict a president while he's in office, but he could have reached a decision as to whether it was criminal activity. But he had his reasons for not doing it, which he explained, and I'm not going to, argue about those reasons. But when he didn't make a decision, the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, and I felt it was necessary for us, as the heads of the department, to reach that decision.
Well, he seemed to suggest yesterday that there was another venue for this, and that was Congress.
Well, I'm not sure what he was suggesting, but the Department of Justice doesn't use our powers of investigating crimes as an adjunct to Congress.
CNN Justice reporter Laura Jarrett is with me, and it's so significant hearing this interview, because as we talked over and over yesterday, right, it was Mueller who stood there yesterday morning essentially saying it wasn't up to me, here are the findings, and now it's on you, Congress. And clearly Mr. Barr feels Mueller could have made a call.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brooke, that he's saying that Mueller should have made a call when he is the one, of course, who lambasted the former FBI director James Comey for doing what he's suggesting Mueller could have done, essentially, which was to put out derogatory information about someone who's not ultimately going to be charged. He knows as of March 5th that Mueller is not going to make a decision on obstruction of justice, but he never pushed him to make that decision. He admits that he is bound by the long-standing Justice Department policy on not indicting a sitting president, a policy that's been in place for decades here at the Justice Department. And Barr understands that Mueller is abiding by that policy, but yet still saying that he somehow should have made a call one way or another. It's an odd statement, I think, for the Attorney General to make, given that policy, and not just the policy in terms of the OLC opinion, but also one of fairness. As Mueller explained both in the report and yesterday, he feels as if you're not going to indict somebody and you're not going to actually put forth that evidence in court, then you cannot put out a report from a government official that, again, puts out derogatory information on.
Yeah, sorry to cut that short. But what I wanted to actually show from that was exactly that. It was the whole thing about, well, it's passing the ball back and forth. Barr's going to sit there and say, well, Mueller could have actually made the decision. No, he couldn't have, because he admitted he pretty much cited policy, and he cited the fact he was hamstringed. And of all we knew that William Barr, because he's the president's man, is going to go ahead and sit there and say, well, he couldn't find anything wrong. Which I knew Barr was Trump's man the moment that Mueller report came to him, and 24 hours later, you're going to sit there and tell me he summarized, which he admitted himself, he did not look at the background evidence, that there was no obstruction of justice on the president's behalf. 24 hours, 400 plus page document. Nobody can summarize that goddamn fast. But again, I'd hate the fact of the one thing that was taken away from that was that I hate that opinion. They keep citing the Department of Justice opinion about indicting a president. It is an opinion. It is not law. It is not case law. Any president, by simply saying that no sitting president can be indicted, you pretty much are just acknowledging the fact that the president does not have to bend down toward the law. No. The Department of Justice can pursue and indict a sitting president. It is the opinion, like it's actual law, even though the only time that any time impeachment actions happen was that when they tried to go after President Nixon. And Nixon resigned before they could bring up articles of impeachment over Watergate. So, to say that a sitting president can't be indicted is bullshit. That the president has put people in certain areas to make sure that doesn't go his way. He has Mitch McConnell at the Senate to basically kill any impeachment things going forward. But his power is only limited to how long he stays elected. He has Mnuchin in the IRS who protects his IRS forms, which after a court order to basically hand over the tax forms, Mnuchin has still yet to do so. At the same time, he has William Barr as the Attorney General, who will not pursue impeachment against the president. So if you really think about it, President Cheeto has got 3 roadblocks set up as a way of removing him from office that pretty much he has people in place that will do his bidding. And we really should not be surprised by that, especially in the same sense where how in the world, when you look at that report, there's no signs of collusion. And honestly, Robert De Niro had the best way to say about it.
See me on Saturday Night Live as a certain federal prosecutor. That was acting. But now we're going to hear from some real federal prosecutors. I have so much admiration for their intelligence and dedication to their work. Recently, over 1,000 former federal prosecutors who served under both Republican and Democratic presidents have united to sign a statement to help Americans understand what's actually in the Mueller report. Their conclusion should trouble us all. Listen to them in their own words.
We are former federal prosecutors.
We served under Democratic presidents
and Republican presidents.
We carefully read and analyzed the Mueller report.
And we all strongly believe that there is more than enough evidence to indict President Trump for multiple felony counts of obstruction of justice.
Of obstruction of justice.
Of obstruction of justice.
Of obstruction of justice.
The evidence shows that President Trump tried to stop, limit, and interfere with the Mueller investigation and other federal investigations surrounding him.
How did he do that?
Here's what the evidence shows.
President Trump tried to fire Mueller.
And then tried to get others to lie and create false evidence about it.
President Trump tried to make sure that Mueller's investigation didn't focus on him or his campaign by controlling who was in charge of it and what they were allowed to look at.
And he tried to prevent witnesses from cooperating with law enforcement.
It's all in the report. You should read it for yourself.
There's more than enough evidence to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt
that President Trump committed the crime of obstruction of justice several times.
But the Department of Justice has a long-standing policy that prevents a sitting president from being charged with a crime.
That's why Mueller didn't say whether he thought President Trump obstructed justice.
But if he weren't in the White House, President Trump would be charged with serious crimes.
This isn't even a close case.
If you or I did what President Trump did, we'd be facing prison. And no one, not even the president, should be above the law.
In the words of the Mueller report, no person is above the law.
And there you have it, folks. And honestly, that's been going on. I've been trying to find that video for the longest time. But yes, 1,000 former U.S. state attorneys, both former and assistant state attorneys. Former state assistant attorneys, both sat there and think about this: 1,000 plus prosecutors looked at the same report that we all got, and all have come to the same conclusion. That yes, Trump obstructed justice. He tried to interfere in his own election, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So again, it's not surprising that when you have all this coming at you, that for the simple fact of the matter, it literally should be easy for Congress. So again, I employ Congress because I come to find out that 1 or 2 congressmen actually watch my show. I appreciate it. But honestly, do your fucking job. That's the truth about it. Do your job. I understand Democrats, and this is the thing about Democrats, you guys, I'm not a Democrat. I'm certainly sure as hell not a Republican. I'm honestly more independent. But for the simple fact of the matter is, Democrats, the reason why Republicans beat you so much is because you guys are never united on shit. Republicans, whether right or wrong, that's a gang mentality over there. Right or wrong, they stick with each other. Democrats are split over the fact of pushing impeachment. Pelosi hasn't said it. A lot of the major heads, Harry Reid, a lot of the major Democratic leaders have yet to really make a decision on that besides Pelosi. And I'm just thinking to myself, when you have AOC, Bernie Sanders, and the rest of the other Democratic candidates are pushing for impeachment, you have split decisions over this, which makes no sense to me. How hard is it for you guys to come together and say, are we doing it or are we not? Because you ran your previous election off the simple fact that you're going to go against the president. You're going to basically push for impeachment. Now, I get it. For all those that don't know how impeachment works, impeachment has to start at the House, which the Democrats are a majority of. They could push articles of impeachment. They also need 2/3 of the Senate to agree with them, which is still, unfortunately, Republican controlled, and Turtle McConnell is still at the head of it. Now, with articles of impeachment, he cannot ignore not bringing it up. However, getting 2/3 of the Senate to agree with us, that's going to be the uphill mark. Like I said, Trump puts people in place to make sure that they can't get to him. It's almost like a game of chess. You're trying to get to the king, but at this point, he's got 3 bishops, 2 rooks, and 1 queen that's ready to back him up. It's hard to get to him. But again, if the Democrats are truly united, then be united and do it. Either do or do not. Because the simple fact of the matter is, this man is running us into the ground on several different fronts, in which we'll get into momentarily. But for all those that are pretty much wondering what Trump had to say, really about after the Mueller report came, after the Mueller response came out, well, he basically had this. And if it sounds like the greatest hits, well, I apologize.
The same as the report. There wasn't much change. It was, to me, the same as the report. And there's no obstruction. You see what we're saying. There's no obstruction. There's no collusion. There's no nothing. It's nothing but a witch hunt. This is a witch hunt by the media and the Democrats, their partners. And it keeps going. I thought it was finished when the report was released, but it goes on. And to me, it was the same, frankly, as the report. And he said basically it was the same as the report. I think he's totally conflicted because, as you know, he wanted to be the FBI director, and I said no. As you know, I had a business dispute with him after he left the FBI. We had a business dispute, not a nice one. He wasn't happy with what I did, and I don't blame him. But I had to do it because that was the right thing to do. But I had a business dispute, and he loves Comey. You look at the relationship that those two. So whether it's love or a deep like, but he was conflicted. Look, Robert Mueller should have never been chosen because he wanted the FBI job and he didn't get it. And the next day he was picked as special counsel. So you tell somebody, I'm sorry, you can't have the job. And then after you say that, he's going to make a ruling on you. It doesn't work that way. Plus we had a business dispute. Plus his relationship with Comey was extraordinary.
So what do we take from that? The simple fact of the matter is that he basically flip-flopped, which we shouldn't be surprised by President Cheeto by now. He flip-flops on everything. He first said that Mueller was a great guy. that he could be trusted, that he was very fair and balanced, But the only people who use bullshit words like fair and balanced is usually Fox News people. So we really shouldn't be surprised that a person who loves Fox News and pretty much tweets and repeats like a parrot would sit there and say that now Mueller he wasn't the right man for the job. We had a business dispute. The business dispute was basically over the fact that Mueller had a membership at one of Trump's properties. That was the business dispute. Now, again, the whole thing about him wanting to be head of the FBI was bullshit because Mueller was once a head of the FBI at one point. He was only brought back as a special investigator because as a middle of the road appointee to appease both Democrats and Republicans as a special investigator because he served under Republican and Democratic presidents. So no, Trump, it wasn't because of his familiarity with Comey. It wasn't because of his business dealings. His membership issue that he had at one of your properties. What it really comes down to is still the fact of the matter is that he said a lot of shit in his report, and his initial response about if we could have exonerated the president, we would have, is the reason why you're sitting there going over, as I like to call, your greatest hits. President Cheeto likes to sit there and say, well, I got the report, it says no collusion. Are we really going to believe the president read the report, number one? Number two, well, it said no, it's like all this no collusion, no thing with Russia, it's all a witch hunt. I'm like, I always wonder how certain people came to power, like Hitler, like cult leaders, and I wonder how easy, because I was like, they keep repeating themselves. And this is Trump's playbook. He also keeps repeating himself. There was no collusion, no obstruction, because he's trying to change the narrative. And you can try to change the narrative all you want to, but the proof is right there in the pudding. In the same sense that you, again, have people set up to block you. Now, Trump also does something more stupid by basically admitting something and then walking it back.
Council refused to publicly exonerate him. President Trump went on the attack.
I think Mueller is a true never-Trumper.
But most of the claims he made in front of the cameras today didn't add up. The president falsely insisting Robert Mueller, a lifelong Republican, had conflicts of interest.
Because as you know, he wanted to be the FBI director, and I said no. As you know, I had a business dispute with him.
Steve Bannon told the special counsel's office Mueller didn't come in looking for the job and told Trump his golf club claim was ridiculous and petty. Today, Trump also claimed Mueller cleared him.
So he said, essentially, you're innocent. I'm innocent of all charges.
But Mueller didn't say that.
If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
Trump said if there was evidence he broke the law, Mueller would have charged him.
There was no crime, there was no charge because he had no information.
But Mueller said he couldn't have charged Trump if he wanted to, due to a Justice Department guideline prohibiting sitting presidents from being indicted.
Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider.
And after retracting his statement that Russia helped him get elected,
no, Russia did not help me get elected.
Trump wrongly said Russia wanted Hillary Clinton in the Oval Office.
I believe that Russia would rather have Hillary Clinton as president of the United States than Donald Trump.
Even though Vladimir Putin said publicly he wanted Trump to win.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because he talked about bringing the U.S.-Russia relationship back to normal.
And the president claimed today the attention has shifted away from Russian collusion.
If you look, this was all about Russia, Russia, Russia. They don't talk about Russia anymore because it turned out to be a hoax.
Russian interference.
But Mueller made clear interference is still a major concern.
This included Russian intelligence officers who were part of the Russian military launched a concerted attack on our political system.
So as you can pretty much see, Trump bullshits a lot, and we really should not be surprised about that. The simple fact of the matter is, if you think this ridiculous, like I said, aside from that part, which it's amazingly so that he's still trying to argue that, he also, and I'll be honest with you, I almost thought this was him. It seems like him. It's something he would do, but I still think he had an issue with it. I still think he had an issue with it with us. What I'm basically talking about is, the USS John McCain, which I'm not going to say he, because it still has reported he did it, but you know what? Let me just let the story be said.
Daughter says President Trump's continued attacks on her deceased father make her feel.
It's impossible to go through the grief process when my father, who's been dead 10 months, is constantly in the news cycle because the president is so obsessed with the fact that he's never going to be a great man like he was.
Even in death, the president continues to go after the late Arizona senator.
I was not a big fan of John McCain in any way, shape, or form.
But he denies going so far as to demand that the USS John S. McCain be moved so that he couldn't see it during his trip to Japan.
But I would never do a thing like that. Now, somebody did it because they thought I didn't like him, okay? And they were well-meaning, I will say.
Well-meaning, appearing to want to please the boss. Officials from the Navy say that the White House military office emailed back and forth with some Navy officials planning for the president's trip, including one email obtained by CNBC stipulating USS John McCain needs to be out of sight. Naval officials confirmed to CNN that the White House asked the ship be moved or obscured. Upon hearing about it, one official said Navy leadership told them to, quote, knock it off. Instead of moving it for the president, the Wall Street Journal, which broke the story, reported that a tarp was hung to cover the name, but the officials say it was there for repairs and taken down before the president arrived. The acting Secretary of Defense says he never issued any orders regarding the ship.
I never authorized or never approved any action around the movement or activity regarding that ship. And furthermore, I would never dishonor the memory of a great American patriot like Senator McCain.
The president has never shared that feeling. In speeches, even as McCain was dying, and then well after, the president has attacked McCain for blocking him from repealing Obamacare. This, of course, after then-candidate Trump denied that the former Navy pilot who was shot down in Vietnam, imprisoned for 5 years, and tortured was a hero.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
Now, Jake, the question is who wrote those emails telling the 7th Fleet to move the USS John McCain out of sight? It's certainly not hard, as you can imagine, for the White House to figure out who that was, but it remains to be seen whether anything will happen to them, especially when the president is out there praising their intentions. As for the crew on the USS McCain, whose namesake is worshipped in the Navy, the president says he owes them no apology. Unbearable.
Yeah, he owes them no apology. You know, it's one thing. I'm sorry. Trump may have not said it, but I honestly, here's my thing. I think Trump mentioned it. Somebody in the White House decided that it was a great idea to please the boss and basically told the Navy, hey, the USS John McCain, we're going to need that out of sight. Do you know, here's my thing. This lets you know how much of an ego President Cheeto really has. You are beefing with the dead guy. I mean, Senator McCain, whether you agree with him about his policies or not, you have to respect his service as a soldier, as a POW. And the simple fact of the matter is the man lived through it. You got to respect that. Now, like I always said best, even in previous podcasts, when I said about John McCain passing, I may not agree with a lot of his political decisions, but the man is still a man. He still should be respected. But President Cheeto, for the life of me, you are beefing with a man who is no longer with us. Come on, dude. I mean, it's one of those things where I just want to sit there and just go, why in the world? And the story is so asinine. But because it's Trump, we really should not be surprised. I mean, we shouldn't. The fact that if let's be honest, if John McCain, rest his soul, John McCain had toilet paper, and it was the best toilet paper out there in the U.S., and the White House had John McCain's toilet paper, let's be honest, Trump would rather have all of John McCain's toilet paper removed, not for the simple fact that he finds a better brand. The simple fact of the matter, it's got John McCain written all over it. And he and his ego, his vanity, just cannot take it. So, we cannot say with absolute certainty that he did not make this decision. However, it does feel like him, because again, is he really too far from the truth to believe that he would probably told somebody it would have been a great idea to make sure that Warship's not, to make sure that name isn't there or anywhere I can see it? I almost guarantee it is. But again, really shouldn't be surprised by that. So, moving right along, I did talk about earlier about Munchin. Munchin kind of reminds me of every douche in every 80s teen movie that just you wanted to punch him. He's got that face. So, of course, they went to court about him releasing Trump's tax returns. And, well, he has still yet to do so. So, with that being said, he was basically grilled over that, and this is pretty much what happened.
Secretary Steve Mnuchin went before lawmakers after his refusal to hand over the president's tax returns. He defended his decision, saying that he made it without the White House input. But that didn't keep members of the House Financial Services Committee from grilling him, not just about his refusal, but also a report out of the Washington Post where it details a draft memo inside the IRS, which is under Mnuchin, that contradicts him on the president's tax returns. The memo said that the tax returns must be given to Congress unless the president opts to invoke executive privilege. Mnuchin told the House panel that he had not seen the memo until the Washington Post called him 2 days ago.
You are at least aware that the conclusion of that memo directly contradicts the conclusion that you're relying upon.
No, I actually don't believe that's the case. That memo, I understand, is addressing a different issue and is not addressing the issue that we in the Department of Justice looked at.
Who at the IRS would have made the decision not to run this memo up the chain?
I have no idea.
Are you going to plan to find that out?
We're trying to find out who wrote the memo, where it came from, when it was, and why it wasn't distributed, yes. I will take a look at the memo. I had not seen it till this morning. We didn't receive it. It was in the Washington Post. It was draft. So obviously we'll take a look at it. To the extent it changes our analysis, for whatever reason, we would recognize that. Again, I think this is a very important issue. On this one request, we've been advised that there are different legal views, and this is why it will most likely go to the third branch of government. And if the third branch of government opines on Congress's right, then we would obviously supply the documents. Our issue is we want to make sure that the IRS is not weaponized for any party.
Did you discuss the memorandum with anybody inside the White House, outside the White House? I'm referring to legal counsel, I'm referring to lawyers, I'm referring to advisors.
Let me be clear. The only person I've discussed that memo with is my general counsel on the car ride over here who's sitting behind me. I have not discussed that memo. Oh, and actually I did ask the commissioner whether he had seen that memo, and he had not.
You know, sometimes I truly do wonder about some of these officials. They swear up and down they're supposed to be leading these major offices that have major impacts on our country. And when it comes to some facts of, well, who wrote the memo? Well, I don't know. Well, aren't you looking into it? Oh, well, we're trying to find it out right now. The Treasury Department, literally housing the Fed and the IRS. You're going to sit there and tell me that you can't figure out who in the world wrote a memo that sat there and cited executive privilege, but you're going to sit there in front of Congress and sit there and say, well, I don't know, but I'm going to stand by it. See, this is where I talked about earlier, where I sat there and said, Trump has people in front of him to protect him. This is one of them. Mnuchin actually is the lone blockade between us and seeing those tax returns. Now, you already saw what the New York Times found out. New York Times was able to get 10 years of Trump's tax returns and find out that he was more than $2 billion in the red. And yet he's considered a successful businessman. I wish I was considered a successful businessman if I lost $2 billion in 10 years. But then again, so has the Pentagon. But you don't see the Pentagon winning any, but the Pentagon gives away war more money. But we're not going to go into that. But again, this is what I was talking about, where it comes down to Trump pretty much has people that'll basically bend the knee in a Game of Thrones type of reference. They bend the knee to protect the king. And it's so annoying because you would think, because the commission of the Ways and Means Committee has the sole ability to request tax returns on anybody, former presidents, past and present included. Munchin is trying to hold us up because he's going to use every rule in the book before those documents come out. The sad part to Munchin that he doesn't realize is eventually he does have to give them up. And if Trump is so-called a successful businessman, as we all say he is, then there shouldn't be any problem giving those documents up. However, if those previous 10 years back in the 80s were of any inconsistencies, as I always said, if you want to find a great crime, follow the money. But getting off Trump for a second, this story out here kind of pissed me off. But then again, I really shouldn't be pissed off because I usually think this is in the South. I used to think this is in the South. This is in fucking New York, where a teacher singled out African American students and cast them as slaves in a mock auction as part of a social studies lesson. Let me go again and rephrase that. I'm not going to rephrase, I'm going to repeat. I'm sorry. Repeat that. A teacher singled out African American students and cast them as slaves in a mock auction. I wish I could make that up. Now, of course, the teacher goes on to be fired, but again, this is the part where it annoys me so, is that you as a student going to this class and basically being put on a mock auction, which I don't know what teacher thought that was a good idea, but that has a negative effect on children. I mean, just like some individuals weaponizing the police against black people, that has a negative effect. You have kids who are literally just going to class, and yes, it was a chapel school, so enter your jokes in where you want to. But the simple fact of the matter is that it happened at this private school. And more importantly, I would be like, if I was the parent, which this is the reasons why I'm not a parent. If I was, my child comes home, they tell me what they did at school. I'm going back up to school. That teacher, that supervisor, the principal, the superintendent. Oh, I'm about to go to jail today because you're not gonna make my child a mock slave, because the simple fact of the matter is that's not how you teach, and that says a lot of things wrong with the way education works around here. I'm all for innovative ways of education. I am. That's not it. You want to talk about innovation and learning? Talk about the real truths that kids need to know. Like I said, if you know your history, you're not doomed to repeat it. So, with that being said, yeah, talk about the fact that yes, we were a nation of immigrants that basically were, our previous history shows that a certain group out there were pretty much oppressors with every race. Tried to actually do genocide against a race. Almost really succeeded. And at the same time, yeah, we were a war country. For our entire existence, there's only been 16 years of peace. Aside from that, we seem to be in engagement in a theater of war throughout any time period. Look it up. 16 years of peace that we've actually had where we didn't actually have a war. But every other time then, you can basically count on both two hands, 2 feet, how many times we've been engaged in some type of conflict. But if you're going to teach education, doing this to kids is negative. And like I said, that teacher honestly should be fired and should be fined and should not be allowed to teach at all. Because if that's the way they're teaching, then obviously something is wrong with them or they're supremacists. One of the two. But moving right along though, 2 things in business. If you guys like the things that you're paying for now, because like I said, with the tariffs that have gone in between China and us and prices are going to go up, you didn't think it could be any worse. Well, Trump decided to one-up the ante.
The battle over the border, announcing new tariffs on Mexico overnight unless Mexico takes action to stop migrants from crossing into the U.S. This comes a day after the largest group of migrants ever was apprehended. It's already rattling financial markets. Our chief White House correspondent John Carl tracking all the latest. Good morning, John.
Good morning, George. The president is calling this his biggest and most dramatic move yet to control the border. The president made the announcement via Twitter, saying that in little over a week, the U.S. would be imposing a, quote, 5% tariff on all goods coming into our country from Mexico, and tell illegal migrants coming through Mexico and into our country, stop. Later, the White House explained the punishing tariff will go up as time drags on, increasing 5% on the first day of each month until hitting 25% in October. Overnight, the reaction was swift. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley calling it, quote, a misuse of presidential tariff authority and counter to congressional intent. The White House explained for the tariffs to be removed, Mexico would have to step up its enforcement on its southern border, crack down on criminal smuggling organizations, and change how it handles asylum seekers. Mexico is one of America's biggest trading partners. The effect of these tariffs would be felt almost immediately by U.S. consumers, who would pay the brunt, most of the cost of these tariffs, as those costs are passed on to those buying Mexican goods here in the United States, George.
And John, one of the broader consequences, just hours before this all happened, the president told Capitol Hill he wanted them to pass this new U.S.-Mexico free trade agreement. That was already an uphill fight. This is going to make it tougher.
This would seem to put that at risk. It would seem to violate, at the very least, the spirit of that agreement, which is all about reducing tariffs with the United States, Mexico, and Canada. But the Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, said last night that this is absolutely separate from any trade move, because this is about controlling the border. But, of course, tariffs are all about trade, George.
Yeah, not clear that that's how members of Congress.
Yes, I wish I could make that up. You think we're beefing with China, now we're beefing with Mexico. And Trump's idiotic idea of how tariffs work. Now, you guys heard me say tariffs a lot of times in this podcast, and me explaining it. Tariffs are never good because the simple fact of the matter is the person usually at the bottom of that tiki pole, us, are paying more. And now, because of the tariffs on China, we are paying more because, let's be honest, 80% of what you usually get, minus groceries, comes from overseas. Mainly because the cost of production and manufacturing is definitely efficiently and cheaper over there. So, of course, you're going to pay more here, especially other retailers who actually are local here will have to raise their prices. Again, the tariffs are being passed on to you. And Mexico imports 20 to 25% of our fruits and vegetables. Avocados, mangoes, you name it, comes from down there. So again, this whole 5% tariff, as it stands, is going to raise prices on food. Who's going to feel it? That's right, us. So again, this is basically Trump's never-ending battle with his own xenophobia and racism. That he wants Mexico to stop the import of their people illegally crossing the border, and doing so by putting a tariff on their goods that they sell here. One problem, that the tariffs are only good for groceries. He's waived them on automobiles. Why? Because GM and Ford have factories in Mexico, because they moved them from up north in the northern states down south to Mexico, where factories are currently being built. 2 of them are actually active, and they're actually starting to put out automobiles. Tariffs are not going to be applied to them. They're going to be applied to the farmers and everybody else that brings in produce. That's how fucked up it is. And Trump knows it. But Trump doesn't care because he thinks that tariffs will force Mexico to bend to his will. Here's the problem. Mexico is in the same boat as China is. Mexico has lower costs of manufacturing and job wages, same as China. They can produce a third of what China produces. And by basically putting tariffs on Mexico, you do not harm it. Why? Because you haven't changed the cost of their manufacturing and producing. You only sit there and charge, however, the consumers, being us, paying more. So again, Trump is now de-escalating. He first wanted a wall. He couldn't get that. He wanted to separate families from children. That was seen as unconstitutional because kids were dying in multi-detention centers. And of course, the growing number of 2,000 plus kids who have been separated from families that have yet to be reunited with them. And so now, what's his next step? His next step is to turn around and basically charge the crap out of Mexico, in which Mexico's not going to feel it, but U.S. citizens are going to feel it. So does anybody feel like they're winning yet? I always love saying that. I always love saying that to Trump fans, because, you know, they always say, we're winning. I'm like, really? You're winning? How's it about, you know, are you paying a little bit extra for your groceries? Are you paying a little bit extra for your electronics? I mean, you guys will say you're winning, but I don't see where the win is. But again, it's an ongoing story which will follow. And before we get to our good news, one last story, which honestly is, I like to call it the next gold rush. CBD oils. CBD, which is basically cannabis oil, minus THC from the marijuana plant, because I refuse to call it a drug. It's a plant. And you guys heard me say multiple times, although I'm not a smoker, I have nothing against marijuana smokers. I honestly, like I said before, there are multiple applications for the cannabis plant. Not just for medicinal, not just for PTSD, not for bipolar. I mean, it can basically help situate a myriad of medical alignments. It really could. At the same time, there's a lot of things that, you know, hemp rope, aloe, butter, biodegradables, which can actually be made into fuel, which cars can run off of. Again, it is almost the second. It is almost like the peanut, because 1,000 different inventions came from peanut, and almost really close to that or more can be done from the cannabis plant. That being said, CBD oil and cannabis, as states across the U.S. are starting to legalize recreational use, CBD oil and marijuana may be the next gold rush. And in doing so, came a day which I never thought would happen. And pretty much the FDA doing this.
And important stories affecting consumers across the country. Tomorrow, the FDA will hold the first public hearing on a plan to legalize CBD in food and drinks. CBD comes from plants in the cannabis family, but unlike marijuana, it won't make you high. It's expected to be a $22 billion industry by 2022. Barry Peterson went to Denver to check out the buzz over CBD-infused coffee. Barry, what exactly does it do?
Well, depending on the amount, people say this CBD-infused coffee helps them feel calm or focused, but you probably won't be able to taste any difference.
I'm going to do a latte.
It's usual for people to buy coffee at the Blue Sparrow, but this being Denver, the blend is unusual. It's infused with CBD.
Can I get the CBD nitro?
John McCaskill used to drink pots of coffee daily, but the CBD version eased his coffee craving.
For me, it got rid of all the jitters.
Isn't that what you drink coffee for?
No, not the jitters, no. The best way I can describe it, it's kind of like taking off and then it just levels out.
I had a chance to start a coffee business, but what I'm doing now is delivering, a better life to a lot of consumers.
Andrew Amott is co-founder of Denver's Strava Coffee.
This is our roastery.
He started as a high-end coffee roaster, but competition forced him to be different. So he added in CBD, and often that's where the misconceptions start.
So if I were to say to you, Andrew, oh, you're selling pot coffee.
No.
What do you say back to them?
We're not selling pot coffee. We are selling a coffee that has been infused with nutrients from a plant that do not have a recreational purpose. They don't produce any kind of high or experience like that.
It's confusing. Pot comes from the marijuana plant that's loaded with THC, the ingredient that creates a high. But CBD oil comes from the hemp plant, soon legal to grow across the U.S. It has trace amounts of THC, but usually too small to make anyone high. And lately it seems like CBD is for sale everywhere, claiming to help with everything from soreness to stress. But that depends on how your body reacts.
The raw cannabis acid,
says Martha Montemayor, a certified nutritional consultant.
So the fad part of this CBD coffee, CBD donuts, CBD spritzers is good for you, not good for you, or nobody knows?
some people are definitely going to feel better. Some people are going to feel nothing.
Back at Strava, this may be the closest thing to coffee heaven, the quality control tasting room. Strava founder Amott is my guide for my first taste of CBD coffee.
Tastes pretty much like normal coffee.
It tastes like great coffee. Caffeine is still there. The CBD is going to balance it out just a little bit, help with maybe some mental clarity, some focus, and then help with just kind of make things a little looser.
Okay, so it's going to kind of take me up and calm me down at the same time.
A little bit of that.
Strava's CBD coffee is pricey. One of the cheapest bags sells for around $20. The most expensive, with 8 times more CBD, will set you back $54.95.
Okay, so hold on. So it tasted like regular coffee, but the big question is, how did you feel?
So pretty much the simple fact of the matter is, I love this. Like I said, I don't consume. I'm going to definitely start looking into CBD companies and marijuana companies to start investing, because $22 billion by the year 2022. This is like getting into the front door at Google when Google was starting out, for all those that remember. But yeah, I love the idea of this. Like, it's finally coming around. Like I said, for all you guys out there who are my tokers, and for all those out there who are fans of the hemp plant, I'm happy for you. I'm happy for it. It's finally maybe, and I say maybe heavily, that finally we might actually get some progression on this. Because like I said, this might actually get those folks who are on Oxycontin and Percocets, who are on antidepressants, antipsychotics, things of that nature. I hope to God this is where we finally start turning the page on that. Because like I said once, I'll say it again. Nobody overdosed on marijuana. Nobody overdosed on CBD oil. Because the simple fact of the matter is, THC doesn't kill. So, but Percocet, Oxycontin, and those narcotic addictive drugs do. So, with that being said, I do hope that it does work out. Like I said, with the FDA reviewing plans, hopefully we'll just make it, hopefully legalize it in the same way that they do alcohol and tobacco, which should be easy. But like I said, I'm definitely going to start looking into companies, and I would suggest you do the same, because it's going to be a boom once, as we've seen in Denver, as we've seen in Rhode Island, as we've seen in other parts. I think it's up to 9 states now that actually have recreational use. Or is it? I'm sorry, let me take that back. 4 states have recreational use. 9 states have medical marijuana. But it is still moving forward. I mean, you can't knock that. But again, it's one of those things to where I sit there and say, you really can't just not knock it. I think, honestly, it's great. But that's pretty much our last story as we move on to our good news. Now, usually for good news, we usually leave it, as I said, I know a lot of times we talk about doom and gloom and just bad things altogether. So it's always nice to find some stories that, restore your faith in humanity a little bit. This one, it does, because I love the fact of the matter, but it also presents a problem. And this story, honestly, is basically about a barbershop owner who raised money to pay off high school fees, blocking 14 kids from graduating high school. And the attempts actually happened in North Carolina. The guy actually raised more than $4,000 to pay off the school fees that prevented 14 seniors from graduating. Now, as much as this is great, I mean, I love the fact it's great, because anybody who graduates high school, that is no easy feat. I mean, I can talk about education all day. I can sit there and say, for simple fact of the matter, that things need to change. I can sit there and say that we need to, change the way we are teaching our children, things of that nature. But the part that bothered me was that fees will be prevented. Fees prevent a child from graduating. And I think to myself, that's fucked up. Because I don't care what it is. If a child graduates, let them graduate. Give them their goddamn diploma and let them move on to whether, they go into trade school or college or maybe enlist in the military or armed forces, what have you. Let them move forward in their life. They should not be hamstringed because of some stupid ass school book fees or fees with the band or anything of that nature. It honestly makes no sense to have people do that. And again, like I said, I can go on about that, but again, I'm happy that someone has taken it upon themselves to remove that obstacle for those children. Much like that guy who, I can't think of his name to save my life, who was at Morehouse College about a week back, and multi-billionaire decided to pay off the student loans to the graduating class of 2019, which was, I think, a little over $40 million. And I wish I could have been a part of that graduating class, but hey, We all get there someday. But again, it's things like that that make me think that's an impact that can actually pay it forward type situations. In this case, kudos to the barbershop guy and kudos to that barbershop guy in North Carolina for actually doing that, because you've impacted a lot of those 14 kids, and that's always great to see people do things for the community and make it grow. Now, the last thing I got left is honestly from a guy who we haven't heard from in a while because he's passed, but I still think what he has actually said definitely radiates a lot with the community, with the world, and I'm talking about Mr. Rogers. And if you don't like Mr. Rogers, well, fuck you.
Our world hangs like a magnificent jewel in the vastness of space. Every one of us is a part of that jewel, a facet of that jewel. And in the perspective of infinity, our differences are infinitesimal. We are intimately related. May we never even pretend that we are not. It's not the honors and the prizes and the fancy outsides of life which ultimately nourish our souls. It's the knowing that we can be trusted, that we never have to fear the truth, that the bedrock of our lives from which we make our choices is very good stuff. Deep down, we know that what matters in this life is more than winning for ourselves. What really matters is helping others win too, even if it means slowing down and changing our course now and then. Beside my chair is a French sentence from Saint-Exupéry's Little Prince. It reads, "L'essentiel est invisible pour les yeux." What is essential is invisible to the eye. Well, what is essential about you? And who are those who have helped you become the person you are? Anyone who has ever graduated from a college, anyone who has ever been able to sustain a good work, has had at least one person, and often many, who have believed in him or her. We just don't get to be competent human beings without a lot of different investments from others. I'd like to give you all an invisible gift. A gift of a silent minute to think about those who have helped you become who you are today. Some of them may be here right now. Some may be far away. But wherever they are, if they've loved you and encouraged you and wanted what was best in life for you, they're right inside yourself. And I feel that you deserve quiet time on this special occasion to devote some thought to them. Whomever you've been thinking about, imagine how grateful they must be that during your silent times you remember how important they are to you.
Well, no more can be said about that. Like I said, Mr. Rogers is the man. So that's gonna pretty much be that's gonna be our podcast for today, guys. Let you know, thank you guys for all watching. I apologize for being a little bit late, but just to go ahead and do some shameless plugging before I get out of here. two guys who are actually watching this right now. I'll go ahead and get to them. In our table of bosses, as we usually call ourselves, our group. Trace Brown, who's usually watching this, which I'm still surprised he hasn't said bump down by now. Which basically, the Bump Down is a musical podcast which goes where he basically goes over music, charts, knowledge, and numbers. Yes, Vaughn, I got it right. So pretty much, it is a musical podcast where he goes over what's hot on the charts and what's not, what's happening on the main scene, on the underground, and gives his perspective of the recording industry. So if you are an up-and-coming musician, or if you just want to learn more about how the way things work, definitely listen to his podcast. If you have music that you do want to have played on the Bump Down, please look up DJ King Anyway on Facebook and on YouTube, as he will basically walk you through about how to do that. He also has a Smoke with Truth, which the Smoke with Truth, as I like to call it, the in-your-face, check your ego at the door podcast, in which he goes to the brutality of it we know it as the truth. It may piss you off, but it will set you free. Very unorthodox, but very intelligent brother. Definitely listen to as far as that goes. As far as that guy, Vaughn, as BBZA has several podcasts of his own. Also watching this, he actually has the I Get That Reference BST, which is a 30-minute podcast, which he goes over news and views and things of that nature. This is fun, interactive show, just like mine. He also has Rhythmness, where he can reminisce over the rhythm, where he goes over musical albums and grades to a 4-tier system. I usually genocide a lot of those actual albums just because I am a very picky person of hip hop. I'll just put it that way. But want to know why genocide? But want to know what that 4-tier rating system is? Definitely got to watch Rhythmness to find out. He also has Random as Fuck with Uncle VZ, as I like to call it, the pool of ratchetness we sometimes dip our toes into to give us a break from life and have a little bit of a laugh at it. Sometimes he finds the funny, sometimes he finds the interesting, sometimes he finds the what the fuck. But either way, it's Random as Fuck. All these shows that Vaughn has can be found on his calendar. So if you look up A71 Spawn on Facebook, or look up the I Get That Reference video on Facebook, the calendar is there to be able to see when he actually does that. Our other friend of mine who's not here but should be here in about the next 2 hours or so, Thomas Reed, we call him the Mountain Puncher, will be doing his To Be Determined podcast. What is To Be Determined? It is a fitness podcast, because if you've ever seen Thomas, he always stays in the gym. As he's dedicated to his zenith. But he likes to share his knowledge of what works for him, what moves, things of that nature, in his own personal testimony, that he believes that he can help people out as far as helping you find your zenith. Want to know what that is? Definitely got to watch To Be Determined at 3 p.m. to find out. Now, aside from my How the Frack We Got Here show, I do have my Off-Limits podcast, which we will have later. I'm hoping to have a full house with everybody here as we'll go into that subject. What is Off-Limits? Off-Limits is exactly what it sounds like. We do go for the uncomfortable subjects. We do talk about the things that is usually talked about in barbershops. And we might talk about something that either make you think or piss you off or make you want to talk to us. Either way, completely interactive. But that actually will begin at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. tonight. And I have decided that this Sunday night will be the first instances of Get Bit. What is Get Bit? Get Bit is going to be my computer/video game podcast. Now you're probably wondering, as we do have our Pick Up the Sticks, it is going to be slightly different because Pick Up the Sticks we do talk about, as we will talk about the upcoming E3 that's going to be happening next month, not next month, and the next week in June. But what Get Bit is, I'll go a little bit deeper in video games as far as seeing the culture and where things are going from, and computers, because as you've probably been heard a lot, I've been referred to as tech support, mainly because my job is working on computers most of the time. But I wanted to share some instances and some history and some know-hows and what you can do to either build your own machine, keep yours up to date, just do certain things which I find informative, and just going from there. So Get Bit will actually start this Sunday at 7 p.m. here on Facebook Live. And the last thing I got to say is that we all do have active YouTube pages. So if you look up BigBZA.podcast, look up DJ King Anyway, and if you look up How the Frack We Got Here, and if you look up Off-Limits Podcast, and soon to be Get Bit, all of those will be live active YouTube pages so you can like, share, and subscribe, and be able to watch it, and be able to watch all of our active podcasts from there. At the same time, we will have Trace and Vaughn, if you're watching this, you guys already have audio podcasts for your podcast. I will soon be joining you regarding that. So with that being said, you can definitely, Trace and Vaughn, if you're still watching this, go ahead and post to where they can get those audio podcast links from. And I will, once I have mine set up, be able to do the same. So with that being said about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. What staying informed means is that you're not looking at everything at face value. You're going beyond that. You're actually going in and doing your own homework, finding the sources that actually tell the truth, and then once you come back, explain to somebody else what you found, and hopefully empower them to do the same thing. Because an informed community can make a lot of better decisions than an uninformed one, because an uninformed one got us Trump, and that's how the frack we got here. So, guys, look forward to seeing you guys all on the Offense Podcast later on. Like I said, Trace, Vaughn, hope you guys are all going to be here for that. Aside from that, guys, have a wonderful Saturday, and I got to come with a better catchphrase. Peace.